Hello, everyone. I'm Nancy Bronstein. I am a Viking educator, and I am your teacher today for our hoop class. How's my sound before I get going here? Is it okay for everybody? Just do a test with that quickly before we get started. So I'm going to look at the comments and see what people think. Hello, everyone. I'm Nancy Bronstein. Sound is good? Yes? Good sound. Okay, great. Like I said, I am a Viking educator. I'm very happy to be here with you today. I'm coming to you from Western Massachusetts, which is very cold and snowy. We just got about a foot of snow and are going to get a little bit more, hopefully not too much. And today I'm going to talk to you about some optional hoops. Some of you may have some of them, and hopefully I'll give you some new ideas of things to do with them, and some of you may not have them, and if you don't have them, I hope that you rush out and get them because I think they're a lot of fun to work with. In general, they are hoops where you can do bigger embroideries, except for the metal hoop comes in 3 different sizes. But we're going to start with the big daddy of all of them, the Majestic Hoop. So I'm going to switch to my presentation here. And the Majestic Hoop, as you see in the picture, is a very large, oh, I don't want this view. I want a view where you see this bigger. There we go. That's the view that I want. It's a very large hoop. It is the largest hoop in the domestic market. It's a turnable hoop. And the way the hoop works is you will do half of the design lengthwise, then you'll get a message on your machine to disengage the hoop and turn it around. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that by switching my camera. Let's see here. That's not the one I want. That's the one I want. And let's give it to you. Okay, so this is my camera. I did half of this design in this hoop, and it actually doesn't even show you the whole hoop. So let's pull this out. And no, let's just pull this back. So you'll see it's a very large design. And on my screen, on my Designer Epic 2, you'll see the whole design. And I have done just this part here on the right-hand side. And when you get done with that side, you get a message to take your hoop out, and then you will turn it and stick it back in and stitch down to the other side. So you can make these very large designs. In fact, I'm going to show you a quilt that I made with this hoop. I should have some pictures first in my slideshow. Maybe I'll show you that first. So this is a lap quilt that I made with this hoop. And you'll see that the designs are really large. Those 4 rectangles were each one Majestic hooping, or where I had to turn it. And it's a little bit of an interesting quilt, I think, because when I go into a close-up of the blocks, the way that I did them, maybe I should just pull out and show you the actual quilt. So when I made this quilt, I used, in the large embroidery areas, I used only white embroidery thread. And I hooped my quilt sandwich and did a quilt-as-you-go method to put this quilt together. Now, as you look at this, you'll see that it is different colors because I took the, after I had embroidered it, let me get this so that you can see this well. I used colored pencils to color it in to give it shades of different colors, and then added some crystals. So it's colored both on the front side and the back side, because it was all stitched at once, but with white thread, and then I used the colored pencils. Now the central areas, I used regular, colored embroidery thread, but instead of using a white embroidery thread or a black embroidery thread on the back, what I did is I went to the trouble of winding bobbins of each of the colors, and when I say switch to the green, I switch to a green bobbin, and when I switch to the purple, I switch to a purple bobbin. So it is basically reversible. See if I can get back far enough where you can see it. We see part of it. Now I would say that the right side, if you look closely, looks nicer. However, it is pretty reversible using that technique. And you can see how you can make these huge embroideries using that hoop. Oh, here's another quilt that I made. I forgot had this one here. And this one is a design that I put together with the software, this central panel. And so another huge design using that Majestic hoop. So you can make your own panels for your quilts if you like. But there are designs. Let me go back to my presentation here. There are designs that come with the hoop. There's 3 designs, one of which is this design that's on the picture here, which I made into a yoga bag. And then there are 48 designs in the My Sewnet library currently. All you have to do is search on 360 by 350 turnable hoop, and you will see the 48 designs that are there. The design that I stitched out on my Epic 2 right now is one of many that are in the My Sewnet library. When you search on the turnable hoop, there's many beautiful designs that could be made into a lovely quilt or wall hanging, like this one that I'm stitching out now. Whoops, that's not what I want. I want to go here. So you see that there are a lot of possibilities with this hoop, particularly if you like big, bold designs, which I like. The older I get, the more colorful and the bigger and the bolder that I like my embroidery. So now I'm going to go to the next hoop. Let me go back to my presentation here. See if there's anything else I want to say about that. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you how to find the tutorial that's on the Epic 2 or the Designer Epic, the original Epic. It's also on the Brilliance 80, on the new Sapphire, any of the machines that have the Joy OS Advisor. So let's go to that view. That's not the right view. Here we go. And that's not looking very big on my screen. Let me see if I can make that larger. There we go. Okay, so when you open up your embroidery machine, when you have the Joy OS Advisor, it opens up to a screen like this. And when you go towards, or actually I should say, the Epic 2 is available with different color schemes. So if you have an Epic 2 and yours doesn't have this bold pink and orange scheme on it, that's because you didn't pick the Vivid Sunset color scheme. But in your settings, there's 4 different color schemes that you can set your Epic 2 to have, and this is my favorite. So on the Epic 2, if you are in embroidery, there are a whole bunch of different tutorials. With the addition recently of our ribbon embroidery capability, we now have more specialty embroidery techniques than any other brand on the market except for our sister brand. And if you go to Specialty Hoop Embroidery, then you will touch that. And yeah, we'll clear the ongoing work. And down here, the tutorial will open up and you can make it bigger. And then you just scroll through and it walks you through how to use this new hoop, step by step. Then when you close the tutorial, it will show you the onboard designs that are made for that particular technique. So we have on the Epic and the Epic 2 and our other machines, hundreds of beautiful embroidery designs that are made for different techniques. And if you open the tutorial first, then you close the tutorial, your embroideries that are for that particular technique will be right there. So then you can just load it right from that screen and you're good to go. And I did want to point out that this is actually two separate designs because it does one part, then you flip the hoop and do the other part, because the hoop has, you're able to flip it because it has a bracket on one side and the other side. But if I look at my layers here, you'll see that there are two separate designs. So that's how that particular hoop works. Now let's go back to my presentation here. And we showed that already. So the next hoop I want to talk to you about is the Mega Quilters Hoop. And the Mega Quilters Hoop is made for people that like to do big block quilts. So if you're a person that, say, likes to do 10 by 10 blocks or 8 by 10 blocks, this hoop would be for you because it will save you on stabilizer and fabric rather than going with a bigger hoop and then cutting it back down. I think it's also easier to center things and get the designs where you want them when the hoop is the size that you're going for, or pretty close. So it's basically a 10 by 10 hoop, just a smidge bigger. And when you purchase the hoop, there are 3 downloadable designs that you go right along with that are very pretty. I stitched one out and I'm going to show you in a minute. And I probably should have said right from the very beginning, and it is in on the class description, that okay, so we got some questions and I'll get to those in just a minute. I should have said in the beginning that there is an accessory guide that's available to you either from your dealer or from our website. And in the description of this class, there's a link where you can download this. And in the accessory guide, it will go over all of these hoops, or all the hoops that we have, and tell you which machines they are compatible with. So if you have the Designer Epic or Epic 2, all of these are compatible. You know, there's not going to be any problem. But this next one we're going to do, the Mega Quilter, it's good for Topaz 15 up. So quite a few machines are able to use this quilt. Okay, so now I'm going to see what questions we have. Okay, so there's a question of, I have this hoop, but how do I get the second side to line up? Mine is way off. Well, if you have shifted things a bit, like if, for instance, this design that I just did had a lot of applique where I had to pull the hoop out and cut the applique fabric and push it back in, and things shifted. Or if it seems like it's not lining up to begin with, you would use design positioning to line up the two sides. And let me go over to my hoop here. and show you that you see up in this corner there are 2 stitches there, and there's 2 stitches in that corner, and those are actually there's 2 stitches on the corners in the middle at the top and down here, and those are to help you to line things up. And then inside of the JoyOS Advisor, there is a tutorial on how to use the design positioning function, and I'll show you how you would find that. So I'm going to go back to this screen. So I'm going to go back to my home screen, and I'm going to go to the Knowledge Center, and in the Knowledge Center there is a topic called, let's see, now if I remember where it is, it's in Sewing Instructions maybe. Nope, that's not it. I know it's in here. I haven't looked for it for a long time because I know how to do it. So Embroidery Accessories. Design Positioning. Okay, so you go into the Knowledge Center, then you go to Step-by-Step Workbook, and then Design Positioning. There are tutorials here on how to do the design positioning. So that's a class all in itself, kind of design positioning, but it takes a bit of practice. I will be, frank with you that it's not something that you push a few buttons and you automatically have that thing lined up. It's a matter of getting familiar with the idea of how it works and practicing it a bit, and then you'll be fine. You'll be good to go. It's like riding a bicycle. But you should work through the tutorial or go to your dealer and have them help you see how to do design positioning. Now, each level of machine does it a little bit differently, and of course, as you get to the higher end machines, it's easier. For instance, the JoyOS Advisor screen is much bigger. It's easier to see, and it's a more sophisticated design positioning the way that it works in the machine. As you get a better machine, things get easier. They get more powerful, and they also get easier to use. So design positioning, like I said, just takes some practice. Okay, so let's see what other questions we have here. What kind of pencils did you use to color the design? I use Derwent Inktense pencils, and those are really wonderful pencils. Let's see if I have the sample. I could show you something else that I did with them. Oh, I must have taken it put it somewhere else. Anyway, what's great about the Derwent is that you can mix different colors. You can make it an intense color. You can make it very light. It looks like watercolor if you're doing, say, you're filling in a big area rather than just coloring over thread. And you can use, there's a, forgotten the name of it. There is, I'll look it up and I'll put it in the comments. There is a fabric medium. It's a liquid that will, you wet the area that you've put the pencils on, that makes it permanent. Or some people use aloe. I have not used aloe. I've just used fabric medium. And you can get both of these things at your big box stores. The Derwent Inktense pencils are more expensive than your usual colored pencils, but they last a really long time, and they really are really nice to have. So that's what I use to color the white thread on that quilt that I made in the Majestic Hoop. So let's see. Now, next question is, do you actually turn the hoop or remove the embroidery and put it back in the hoop? The beauty of this hoop is that you don't take it out of the hoop. When you take just think about it, when you do a big embroidery, and if you're only doing half of it, when you take it out of the hoop, you have to fuss with it a bit to get it back in the hoop the same way. The Majestic Hoop, it stays in the hoop, and I'll show you what I mean. What would be the next step on this particular item that I have on my Epic 2. So I've done this side. What I would do, I would get a message on the JoyOS Advisor, and then I would take this out, turn it around. So I'm turning it around so that it's going back in, and then I stick it back in, and now I'm going to do this side. So it is, pull this back maybe, you can see a little bit better. So now I'm going to do this whole side. So that's the beauty of this hoop, is that you're not re-hooping it and having to try to get it back in there the exact way you put it in there the first time. Okay, so next question. What specific machines can the 260 by 260 hoop work with? Well, that would be in that accessory guide. And it's a lot of machines. It's like the Topaz 50 and up. So it is, if you have, for instance, a machine that came with a 260 by 200 hoop, it will probably work on your machine, but I would definitely look in the accessory guide. The accessory guide will tell you in the very beginning what type of machine you have, what class machine you have. They're all listed here. And then when you open up the information about the hoops, you look in the accessory guide or on the box to see if it will work with your class machine. Like the Epic is a class 8, the Epic 2 is a class 9, and the other machines are below that. So you find out what class your machine is and look on the box or look in your accessory guide. And like I said, this is available potentially at your dealer. And if not at your dealer, you can download it and have it on your computer whenever you want it. So it's a great reference. I've said this in all my classes. Everybody should have one that has a Viking, because it has all the feet in there, shows a picture of the feet, and also shows you instructions on how to use the foot. So, it's free. Why not download it? So that's that. Another question, are the Majestic designs all ready to stitch out, lined up, or do you need to design position to use the hoop? You will need to at least check with design positioning that it's lined up. I have done a number of designs, and there's very little that I had to do, but if you don't check, that's the time when it's going to be wonky. That's just the way that it works. So always check with design positioning that it is fine. Although, like I said, the designs that I've done, I've just stitched one side out, turned it, and stitched the other, but I always check. Meredith, it doesn't work with the Topaz machines. I was told that it did. So I think that should be checked, because the higher-ups told me that it did. I have a feeling that the website hasn't been updated, because the 260 by 260 hoop is a brand new hoop, or relatively new in the last year. And for instance, it would not work with the designer Epic until the Epic got the latest firmware update after that hoop came out. And it may be that the lower level machines, it won't work with them unless your firmware is up to date, because it is a new hoop. It won't be listed automatically if you bought your machine, say, 5 years ago. You may need to do a firmware update. Thank you for clearing that up. That's what I should have said, that you may need to do a firmware update to use that hoop. But it will work out of the box with the Epic 2. And the designer Epic, you would need to do an update, which is done very easily through wireless. Just the push of a button and away you go. So it's very simple. Okay, so that's the questions. Now I'm going to go back to talking about the Mega Quilters Hoop. So I was saying that it is about 10 by 10, a little bit bigger. And this is a design that comes, one of the downloadable designs. You can see how pretty it is. And one of the things that's really nice is it's already set up to be a quilt block, because it has the stippling around the outside. So you could make a quilt with this as the central image, or it could be that you would make this as just a block and make other blocks with other types of embroidery. Then this is a block that's in the My Sewnet library. There are a number of blocks like this that you can download that will work beautifully with this hoop. And you'll see it has a type of stippling already in the background. For those of you who are not aware of what the My Sewnet library is, Viking has the, well, it's called the My Sewnet library, and Viking has this live streaming software subscription library called My Sewnet. And the My Sewnet library, as I said, is a subscription service. And there's over 5,500 designs in there currently, and they're adding more every week. You can download any design you want 24/7. You search and find just what you're looking for. Like you search on the Majestic Hoop, but you wouldn't put Majestic Hoop, you put 360 by 350 turnable hoop, and it returns 48 designs. There's a whole bunch of designs for the Mega Quilter Hoop, as well as many, many beautiful designs of all sorts and types. And the beauty of the library is that, in my mind, one of the beauties is that it is searchable. I have probably hundreds, if not thousands, of embroidery designs on my computer, but can I find the one I want when I want it? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, and I give up. With the library on your computer, well, on your Epic 2, you can look through the library and download whatever you want and search. But if you don't have an Epic 2, you can go on your computer and you can search on all sorts of things. Like you want an applique that's a flower, or you want a cut work animal. You know, you can just decide what you want, and I bet there's a design for it. So it's a really nice service to have, and it comes with our new My Sewnet software. But that's another class, and we're going to go back to the hoop. Let's see, no more questions? Okay, good. So I'm going to go back to looking at these designs. So as I said, this is from the My Sewnet library. And this previous one is one that comes with the hoop. Now, this is a design that I made in the My Sewnet software with the Spiral Wizard. This is a new wizard that wasn't in the Premier 2 embroidery design software. It's a new feature in the My Sewnet library, and I love it for making quilt blocks. It's a lot like when we were kids. If you had a spirograph, some of you, if you're my age, you probably had a spirograph and you made these kind of designs. It's a lot like that. And with the software, you can put your block size in, and you can whip up a design like this in, I don't know, 30 seconds or something. Then you bring it into the quilt block wizard, and you'll get the stippling along the outside, and you'll have your quilt block. And each one will be unique, and nobody else will have that one. So it's a really nice feature. I'll show you another thing I did with that. Here's a table runner, much smaller block. You know, these are tiny blocks. But I made these spiral designs the size of this block in order to, and I used the design to quilt those blocks. You know, I put the quilt sandwich in and then made a bunch of those spiral designs. So I'm loving that new wizard. Okay, now back to the presentation here. So the next hoop that I wanted to talk about is the 3 metal hoops. So as you see in this picture, there are 3 different sizes of metal hoops. And I would probably say if push came to shove and somebody asked me, what's your favorite hoop? I would probably say, for me, the large metal hoop. I just find that it's very versatile. It's not really huge. I mean, I love the Majestic Hoop for really big designs, but I use the large metal hoop for almost all of my garment embroidery. You know, like if I have ready to wear that I want to embroider, because it's easy to get it on top of the metal hoop. The way the metal hoop works, let me get my hoop out. Okay, so your metal hoop is basically a metal frame. So it looks like this, very flat, very skinny. And it comes with some very powerful magnets. Now, if I got up really close, you'd see how well used this hoop is, because it's seen, it's seen a lot of wear and tear. It's been all over the country, and I apologize for the fact that my magnets are kind of, they've got my initials all rubbed off of them, and it's just a very well-loved hoop because I use it all the time. So when you're going to embroider with this, you would place your stabilizer down, and then there's these magnets that hold everything in place. They are very powerful. Now, if you use sticky stabilizer, you would put it on the bottom of the frame and stick it to the back side of the frame, and then stick your thing that you are embroidering on top. So, but if you're not using sticky, if you're using, say, tearaway, you would lay your tearaway on top and then place your magnets to hold down your fabric, like so. And it's super easy and fast to do. It's what the thing that makes, another thing that makes it very versatile is the fact that because you're not putting things in a hoop, you're not squishing them between the two parts of the hoop, you can use this with very delicate fabrics like tulle or velvet, or on the other end of the spectrum, something like leather or vinyl. Is if you put either of those types of fabrics, tulle or velvet or leather or vinyl, into a hoop, it's going to mark the fabric. Like you will have to cut that part off or put it into a seam, because you'll never get it back to looking the way it did before you squished it between the two parts of the hoop. But the metal hoop with these powerful magnets will hold everything in place, and you don't necessarily have to use the sticky stabilizer, but it will hold everything in place. And you could, if you say you were working with something like vinyl in a regular hoop, you could float it and then baste it. However, if you're basting vinyl or leather, those holes will never go away. You pull those basting stitches out, unless you're going to cut that part away, you have made little dots on your project by basting it to stabilizer. So the metal hoop holds it all in place. So in addition to using this for garments, I also use it for bag making. I don't have my bag here. I do a lot of bag making and do embroidery on vinyl or leather, and this is my hoop of choice to do that. So we've got a question. Please explain how to use the grid on the magnetic hoop. Okay, I was hoping nobody would ask that because I lost my grid a long time ago, but I will explain how you would use it. The grid on your metal hoop, you have these tabs. That this is the middle of the hoop, and there's a tab up here. It's a raised area, and your the grid that comes with it will lay on top of that, and these there's a cutout of the grid so that it fits squarely and firmly on top of here. And you can take that grid that has a hole, it has a center on the grid, and place that on top of your fabric and make marks so that you know exactly where the middle of your hoop is going to be. You can draw lines. I apologize that I don't have that. However, if I had it, I would demo it. But like I said, what I do is I use these marks here, and where they intersect, I know that is the center of the hoop, because I no longer have that grid that came with it, because that was a long time ago that I got it. I guess I'm going to have to get another one because the people are going to ask me that. I shouldn't. I should have that to demo. Okay, how many magnets do you use on the large hoop? I would recommend that you use 6 to 8, depending upon the fabric. The large hoop comes with 4 powerful magnets. You can get extra magnets, or if you buy 2 hoops, you will then have 8 magnets, so you'll be good to go. And somebody asked about the hoop sizes, and I have that on the slide here. So the small is about 4 by 4, the medium is about 5 by 7, and the large is 9 by 6 in inches. And then you see the millimeters there on the screen. So the small hoop is really good for doing things like, oh, there's the grid right there that I was talking about. And you see there's a cutout here for those tabs. And there's also cutouts in the middle so that you can mark your fabric. I was beginning to say that the small hoop is really good for making onesies. And it holds the back side of the fabric away from your embroidery field, so you do not embroider your 2 pieces to each other and prevent the child from ever wearing the onesie. So let's go to the next slide. So here's an example of something that I use the magnetic hoop to embroider on a piece of tulle to make a scarf. So it's really great for that, that application, for something that's very delicate. And then a picture of the vinyl being stabilized on the hoop by the magnets. Another time that I will use this hoop frequently is with making lace. And I like using it because of the fact that you will do the first part of the lace, pull off your magnets, and then just pull your stabilizer up. You can stick another piece underneath if you don't have enough. You don't even have to take it out of the arm. You just pull your magnets off, pull your stabilizer up, then use design positioning to get it positioned again, and just keep going. So you keep adding to your stabilizer, your water soluble. This is Aqua Magic, which is what I would use to make lace. And it's super easy to just keep building on this lace and just keep going and going. Now, when I add a separate piece of Aqua Magic, I do add a little bit of tape here outside of where it's going to embroider, just to hold it in place so that the embroidery foot doesn't catch on it. But besides that, I mean, it's super easy to do with this hoop. And this is showing how it's great to use for small garments. Like, this is the biggest hoop. This is the 240 by 150. And this is a fairly small little child's shirt, like maybe a size 2T. And you can easily pull the backside away and stabilize it with the magnets. And this is on some sticky stabilizer to hold this middle part in place. And by using this, you also aren't stretching out this knit fabric. So in addition to it being a great hoop for tulle or velvet or leather or vinyl, it's also really good for stretchy stuff so that you don't overstretch the fabric. So this is what I ended up embroidering on the bottom of that little shirt. And this was made in the Epic with design shaping. Design shaping, you can make things in different shapes. I chose a straight line and then just added these little mini designs to make my bug shirt. And if you're interested, I could show you how you would do that. Let's see if there's okay, we got the sizes. Okay, so no more questions. So we'll go on to the next slide. So, actually, I didn't want to do that yet. I wanted to talk to you about how you would use this hoop for quilting. So I'm going to go back to this view and show you a quilt that I recently made. Okay, so Viking has a whole cloth quilt. I'm looking for the picture. Viking has a whole cloth quilt collection, and some dealers still have it. However, the designs are also in the My Sewnet library. So if you have the library, you have these designs. You just search on whole cloth. And you take your fabric, make a quilt sandwich, you know, your top fabric, your bottom fabric, your basting, your batting. And you are going to start in the middle. What you do is well, let me show you the quilt so to whet your appetite. So this is the front side. I've got white fabric with like a charcoal gray thread. And then here's the back side. It's black with white thread. So it makes a really beautiful wall hanging lap quilt. And because it's all done in the hoop, it's pretty fast. I'm a very slow quilter, and but this would take maybe 2 days with the binding. I mean, you could make this as a gift and pretty fast. So the way you do it is you take your quilt sandwich. Like, imagine I have not quilted this yet. I would take my quilt sandwich, fold it in half twice so that I can find my middle. Then I would mark my middle. So I would, in essence, have a mark right here in the middle. And the design comes with this map. And it's 20 different hoopings. And the first hooping is right here in the center. And I have to move my finger the reverse way that I think I should move it because my image is flipped. And right down here is the center of the where you marked your center. You need to put the first hooping, right on the center here, and it will divide that first hooping right down the middle, and it sits right on the middle of your quilt here. And you're going to do 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. It just you keep circling around till you get to the outside of the quilt, and then you're done. Now I'm going to give you a tip that as you're doing this, you are going to definitely need to know design positioning. So practice your design positioning before you attempt this quilt. And particularly as you get towards the outside of the quilt, you have a lot of intense stitching that has been done. So when you get done with one block, I would take the quilt and stretch it a bit. Because what happens is there's so many stitches that as it kind of draws up. And then what will happen is the middle section, each rectangle, will be, they won't line up as well. They'll be off like by 1/8 of an inch, maybe, if you don't stretch it. So that helps quite a bit. Let's see if there's a question. And I'll answer, there's one question, I'll answer that when I'm finished with this. So this is really great to do in the turnable hoop, because if you remember back, not the turnable hoop, the magnetic hoop, the largest one, it's really great because if you remember back to the endless lace, what I would do with this is I put my quilt sandwich down and do my first block. I've got the quilt sandwich rolled up so that it doesn't get hooked underneath the hoop and get embroidered into a big mess. And when I get done with that first initial triangle or rectangle, I pull the magnets off and I shift to the area where the next rectangle is going to be embroidered, and plop my magnet back down, position it, and embroider it. Then I shift it the same way, maybe left or right, depending upon which way I'm supposed to go. And you don't even necessarily have to take it off the arm, because you're just taking the magnets off and adjusting your fabric to get it centered onto the hoop. So I think that would be my hoop of choice whenever I made this particular quilt. And just to give you another idea of what you could do with it, this quilt behind me is the same quilt. See if I can get this. the same quilt that I made with a gray fabric. I didn't like the fabric, so then I took fabric markers and colored it in. And I have taken that quilt to a lot of classes, and a lot of women have said to me, you know, I'm going to make that quilt so then I can sit down with my grandchildren and we can color it in, because it's very much like coloring in a coloring book, because you have the lines already stitched out, like the lines in a coloring book, and you just try to stay between the lines. And it was a lot of fun. It was very kind of relaxing, stress reducing to just sit down and color that quilt. And I was much happier with it because I didn't like my fabric choice to begin with. Okay, so questions. Do you need to change your tension for quilting in the hoop? Yes and no. I think it would depend on the fabric and the batting you're using, but it's the first thing that I always check. You know, I will stitch a part of the design, stop it, pull it off, look at the back and the front, and see if I need to change my tension. I also, if I'm embroidering a quilt, I will always turn off the thread cutter, because what the thread cutter does is it clips the end of the thread like a little tail, pulls it to the back, and if that tail is near another stitch, it gets all wrapped around that stitch, and then you get this, you know, ugly thread glob. So if you cut your own tails, then you're much less likely to have that happen. You know, if you pull up your thread to begin with, like you would if you were free motioning, that will also help. But it goes a long way if you turn off the thread cutter in embroidery for quilting. In general, I love my thread cutter. I will leave it on, except if I'm going to embroider something where you're going to see the back. So for quilting, or for something like a doily, something where people are going to, you don't have a backside to it. You know, it's not going to be inside a garment, or it doesn't have a piece of fabric sewn to the back of it. I'll turn off the thread cutter for those. Now, I have a question of, will the magnets mark velvet? I have not had them mark velvet, so my experience is no. I haven't embroidered many different types of velvet, so there might be a velvet that they would mark, but I don't think it would. You know, of course, you're going to try it before you go to the trouble of, you know, doing an elaborate embroidery and find that they marked it, but I think the answer is across the board, no. Okay, so going back to my presentation here. So the metal hoop has a variety, or a few different accessories. It has the extra magnets. If you just want to have one hoop and only, you know, so you just want to buy the big one and you want to have extra magnets, then you can just buy the extra magnets. I would say that for the smaller hoops, you won't need extra magnets, but if you want the smaller hoop for, say, doing onesies, then you will automatically have, if you have the small and the large, you already have 8 magnets and you're good to go. Now, the other thing that these magnets are excellent for is if you are a home improvement person, they act really well as stud finders. They are so powerful. Whenever I have to find the stud in the wall, I will take I'll take my magnet and move it around the wall, and all of a sudden it'll go and it'll stick to the wall. And I know that there's a nail there, which means that's where the stud is. And I'm not kidding. I use my magnets to find the stud, but I also use them to embroider. Okay, so next accessory. There is this fabric guide set. It's basically a kind of like a metal piece that is a right angle. And this is not very large. Let's see if making it bigger will make it easier to see. I can make, let's see if I can make this bigger so you can see it. No, it's not going to let me do that. So there's this piece of metal here that has a right angle. And then you put your 2 magnets there onto the magnets stick to your metal hoop. And this edge here keeps the onesie from flopping over into your embroidery field while you're embroidering and making a big embroidered globby mess that you have to pull out. So it's really helpful for small clothing items, or if you have two of them and you want to quilt, it will keep that big area of the quilt over on the other side and keep it from flopping over onto your embroidery field as soon as you turn your back. So those things are, if you do those types of embroidery with the metal hoop, you might want to take a look at these fabric guides. Then the last accessory is the Hap Hoop Accessory, which helps to make it easier to do hats. So this is a hat that I set up on my machine. I'm using sticky stabilizer and the hat hoop attachment. And I then have also taken a picture of the instructions that come with it because they're very thorough. And I'm going to show you a hat that I did with my hat hoop attachment. I'd rather be sewing, and it has a bobbin on the back. So if you like to do this type of embroidery as gifts, that hat hoop attachment might be right up your alley. So let's see what other questions we have here. What size embroidery needles do you use when embroidering on a quilt? I generally use about an 80. When I piece, I use a 70 or an 80. And when I am embroidering on a quilt, I'll use an 80, maybe a 90. It depends on how how careful you. I don't want to put this delicately. I'm a finished is better than perfect kind of person. I like to get a good end result, but it doesn't bother me if the needle makes a little bit bigger hole because when you wash a quilt and dry it, those holes shrink up anyway. So I would say an 80 is fine. It's sort of in the middle ground of 70 and 90 to embroider. How do you change the tension on the Epic 2 is the next question. Okay, let me go over to the different screen. So if you're in it, let's go into embroidery. So I'm going to choose embroidery here, and my hoop is going to want to calibrate, or my arm's going to want to calibrate, so I need to get this off of there. Okay, so I choose embroidery. I go to Start New. And let's choose a design. And then I'm going to click on Go to go into Embroidery Stitch Out. And by the way, this screen is where you would turn off your automatic thread cutter. So if I were quilting, I'd go down here to Thread Cut Options and turn it off right there. Now, right down here is where you change your tension. Oh, you can see it on your screen. It's a little icon that looks like the rollers that, or the tension. It doesn't really look like tension discs to me, but at any rate, that's where you would change it. And if you wonder about anything on the screen of the Epic, or quite a few of our machines, the computerized ones, you can always touch the question mark at the top, then touch the icon, and you'll get a pop-up that will tell you what the icon stands for. Oh yeah, this is actually in embroidery, you have thread portioning. With the Epic, it controls the tension and the thread two different ways. There's the tension system, which the tension system is the discs that hold the tension on the thread. And then there's rollers that portion out the thread. So in embroidery, you're using thread portioning, but it's a very similar concept. And that's where you would make changes if you were embroidering on a quilt and you didn't like the results. You may, in some instances, want to turn off the deluxe stitch system, but I generally don't. But, there's always going to be a time when you have, an oddball fabric or thread combination where you play around with it and you decide you want to, there might be that one time when you would turn it off, and it is possible. In general, you don't have to turn off the deluxe stitch system. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, we've got 5 more minutes. If there's a question that anybody has, I will be glad to address it. And if there's anything else that you want to see about these hoops, I would be glad to show you. Okay, I guess that everybody is happy. I hope you are interested in these hoops. If you don't have one, if you like I said, if you like big embroideries, then the Majestic Hoop makes things a lot easier. If you like to do quilt blocks that are like 10 by 10 or 8 by 8, you might want to take a look at the Mega Quilter Hoop. And the metal hoop, if you don't have one, you don't know, you would really love it. You just don't know that you want it, but you would love it if you had it. I mean, I used that hoop in so many different instances, for garments, for bags, for embroidery, for lace making. I mean, it's just super easy using those magnets. So I'm going to thank you again for showing up today for our class. We are having these Facebook Lives about every 2 weeks. So, please be aware that you should check our Facebook page. There'll be more coming out. And we now have a MySewnet Facebook page. So if you're interested in the MySewnet software, definitely check out the MySewnet North America Facebook page. Straw hats how-to. I got a last question. Straw hats would be the same way. You would put as I did let's go back to this picture. As I put the brim here, I would use this on the brim of the straw hat. It would depend on the type of straw hat. If it's like a lady's hat that has a wide brim, you'd certainly have an area to embroider on the brim. But you do have to flatten an area in order to do the embroidery on that area. I don't know how you do something like a pork pie hat. That's just, I don't think that's, you'd need to make a patch and sew it on. But a lady's hat that has a wide brim would be super easy. And, those types of straw hats are definitely the type that you could use this attachment with. And I would again use the sticky stabilizer, and I've got a magnet up here and a magnet down there, and this holding this side. So between the sticky stabilizer and this holding down the brim, because without this attachment, this brim wants to curve up, and then that pulls this part off of the sticky stabilizer. So that's why this attachment is so helpful with hats, is it flattens the brim and holds it in place. And that flattens this area where you're going to embroider. Okay, so again, thanks for coming. I appreciate you coming to my class. If you ever have any questions, I'm Nancy Bronstein Sews on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And, you can shoot me something on Instant Messenger. And, thank you so much for attending. We will be doing these every couple weeks. And again, check out the new MySewnet Facebook page. So everybody stay warm, and we'll see you again soon.